In May, she set up a new outright world record for the grueling UK end-to-end and back cycling route, covering an approximately 2,700 kilometers in an astounding 5 days, 11 hours and 14 minutes.
We anchored to the record because it would allow me to push myself to the limit that at the top end of my capabilities. I had a team, I had a core crew of 7 people, a few individuals from the RAF, from the Royal Marines.
You have been through many moments of extreme fatigue, perhaps even doubts on the bike as you were completing the ride itself. What do you play to stay focused, really?
I remember radioing the crew behind me and just saying, I'm feeling really confused. Like, why am I riding the bike? I forgot what we were doing. I actually lost consciousness while I was riding my bike and went headfirst into a nettle bush. This isn't a game.
Welcome to another episode of Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. My name is Pedro Couto Lopez. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name, and in this podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. Today's guest is a true force of nature, seamlessly blending the worlds of high finance and ultra-endurance sports. Dr. Sarah Ruggins is a Canadian-born finance professional leading St. James Place multi-asset research team and serving as head of investment specialists. But beyond her impressive career in finance, where she champions this discipline, diversification, and long-term perspective, Sarah is also a record-breaking ultra-endurance cyclist. Just last month, in May, she set up a new outright world record for the grueling UK end-to-end and back cycling route, Land's End to John O'Groats and back, covering an approximately 2,700 kilometers in an astounding 5 days, 11 hours and 14 minutes. This feat didn't just break the women's record, it's also surpassed the fastest men's record for the route by over 6 hours. In this episode, we will delve into Sarah's incredible journey of overcoming adversity from temporary paralysis at the age of 18 to becoming a world record holder and a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion within endurance sports and within the refugee charities and the work they do. So get ready to be inspired by her insights, her resilience, her perseverance, and the power of pushing beyond your perceived limits. So let's dive in. Welcome, Dr. Sarah Ruggins, to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
You have claimed the outright world record for cycling the length of the UK and back. And by achieving these, you made history, joining an exclusive group of incredible female athletes who hold the outright record for a feat of endurance over their male competitors. And I straight on to ask you, how does that feel?
Yeah, it doesn't really feel real yet, if I'm being honest. I think when you've had a goal and you've been working meticulously towards that goal for, a year,
Yeah.
when it actually happens and it happened as seamlessly as it did for my team and I, it still feels like a dream. I feel relieved, but it feels like a dream. Yeah.
Well, the scale of what you have accomplished, it's for me hard to put that into perspective, into like the lengths that you went to for training, putting a team together, completing the ride, and breaking the world record in the process, and all of that comes on top of already the struggles that you have had with an debilitating illness that you suffered in your teens. I know a lot of setbacks along the way, and it's quite remarkable. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that letting that feeling sink in is quite, I imagine, is, well, as you said, you're still processing it.
I'm still processing it. And I think throughout all the build up and development to this event, for me, we anchored to the record because it would allow me to push myself to the limit that would be, at the top end of my capabilities. But for me and for the team, breaking the record was never our ultimate objective. That was almost like a distraction. Like my main goal going into these events is to find the limits, my personal limits, both mentally and physically. And in doing that, in this instance, we were fortunate that as a derivative of that, we were able to achieve a record and, make history for women in cycling and women in endurance sport. But yeah, the ultimate goal for me was to just find my limits, build an incredible interdisciplinary team, and see what we could achieve, like working together and problem solving together. So the record was really just the icing on the cake.
Brilliant. I mean, I want to go and I want to touch upon what is breaking the limits. What is, where do you draw the line of what the limit is? And I'm interested to explore that a bit more in detail. But kind of your life is so, it plays out almost like a film. It's one of those things that you just read and you just keep, your jaw keeps dropping and dropping. In admiration. I'm interested in to exploring about a bit more of the nuances of what it means to push the boundaries, push the limits of pain, of suffering, of mental resilience. You have a background in athletics, and then you have transitioned into academia, and now you have into endurance sports, initially running, now cycling. And it's kind of, I wanted to interested to find out if there is a parallel between, finance, the world you work in, and the ultra endurance world that you have now started to dip your toes into. Starting running, starting with a transcontinental race, and now the Le Jogle, or the other way around. What parallels have you found between academia, research, and long distance cycling?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few parallels. So I would say I spent about 12 years in university
Yeah.
for my sins, but I would say there's a lot of parallels because when you're doing, and it was all research led, it wasn't course led,
Hmm.
degrees that I had up to my doctorate. And working in academia and researching in academia is a very solitary, most of the time, process.
Yeah.
And so for me, it really forced me to instill discipline in my life. You are in control of your own schedule and you
Yeah.
alone control your success or not. And so you need to have the methodology and you need to have the resolve to really like see it through to the end within a timeline that you need to kind of
Mm.
execute by. So for me with academia, those kind of tenets of, solitude, of discipline, and of, kind of like robust process are very much mirrored in endurance sport because obviously we have to go inward. It's very solitary. You need to focus on your process, and we can maybe pick up on this later, but my process is my cadence, my heart rate, and my power. Anything other than that is a distraction, including record pace, including pain or fatigue. If it's not those three things, I don't pay attention to it. And then I would say, yeah, methodology and just a robust process carries through to endurance sport as well because you need to be exceptional at problem solving. And the people who are successful at endurance are successful at problem solving. And I would say it's similar in business. So, in my corporate career in finance, I love building teams. I see the power of interdisciplinary teams in kind of driving innovation and in driving change and problem solving. And so I took those same tenets of how I build teams in the corporate world to building my team for this world record challenge. So we actually had very few cyclists on the team, and I did that on purpose because I didn't want groupthink. So I would say all the tenets of, academia, of corporate life can be applied to endurance sports.
Let's go straight into the team building, because it's such an kind of important
Mhm.
aspect of what you just accomplished.
Yeah.
You mentioned the importance of support, of your support crew during the record attempt. You mentioned as well how finally picking these people for their particular expertise. And I wanted to kind of ask you, how did their presence individually, collectively impact your performance?
The record was achieved because of my team. I had the easy job. I had to just shut up and
Hey,
pedal.
easy job.
Seriously, the cycling was the easiest part of this record. I had a team, I had a core crew of 7 people, with one individual floating. So they ran in teams of 3 with a captain that floated between them in 12-hour shifts. But The way I structured the team again, we had a mechanic. Some of them had cycling experience, but most of them were not cyclists. Like no one really knew how to change a tire except our mechanic and our crew chief. And so the way I approached it was really from a principles-led perspective. Who do I trust to make decisions on my welfare? And who do I trust to make decisions that will help us execute this objective, even if it makes them uncomfortable? So I knew all of these individuals. I trusted them with my welfare. But the step beyond that, I think a lot of people don't take into account when they're building their own teams is, can these individuals have the strength to override their feelings towards you to ensure that you get the record? So when I was uncomfortable, if I was throwing up on the side of the road, I didn't want someone there being like, oh, it's okay, just go for a nap for 2 hours. I wanted someone there to say, get on the bike. This isn't a game. So those were kind of like the two principles that I led with. And then other than that, I looked at the variety of, expertise that they could bring to it. So we had a few individuals from the RAF, from the Royal Marines, who are exceptional at, kind of leading teams. We had project managers who were exceptional with the details. And then we had, some analysts who could really run data, run all the computer systems and all the evidencing. And then beyond that, it was just a matter of getting the personalities right and making sure that they knew how to work with each other and that the strengths and weaknesses of each of those individuals fit together like puzzle pieces. And it could not have worked better, and I could not be more proud of them. Yeah.
I mean, brilliant. It's it's such a intricate kind of web of expertise that kind of has to blend together, and what it like not only the skill set but also the personalities and kind of the motivation. And I think this speaks as well to the fact that success sometimes is seen as individual pursuit. But what for you, like, what does this say about the role of the community of a group in achieving success?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, there's a quote, it's like behind every successful individual is a community. And like this record is a complete example of that. So I don't believe, these crude events should be individual records because I could not have done this without people helping me on the road. And I think anyone who's done a record of this nature would agree with me. So I think the crew should absolutely be recognized like line by line on that record alongside my name. And I think it ripples beyond that. And I think we see in endurance sport, while the event itself is quite solitary, you're alone on the bike or you're alone running, um, you have your coaches, you have your family, you have the love and support from even strangers on socials that
Yeah,
are
of course.
coming
Yeah,
to you.
all the
So
support.
it's really what I found most transformative in my performance is being open to letting others help you and cheer you on and really recognizing that while what you're experiencing is incredibly personal, you're not alone.
It captures very well the essence of the dynamics of a group, and what when there is a mission, when there is a purpose that binds them together, what they can achieve in the process. And you talked about pushing the limits, and you need to find people that have a specific set of skills that allow you to do that. But you yourself as to be able to be in that mindset. And I'm wondering, looking from a place of curiosity to you, what you have achieved, as overcoming adversity as a teenager, having faced paralysis, as this experience shaped your mental resilience.
It has. Absolutely. I talk a lot about, people who have been through life-changing illness
Hmm.
or injury or events of some nature. It's very easy for us to focus on what these things have taken away from us, and they do take away a lot from us,
Yeah.
but we also need to focus on what they give us. And so my illness, it changed my life, but it doesn't mean that my new life is a bad life. It's just a different life. I have new capabilities. So what it's given me is an ability to have an incredibly strong mind-body connection, an incredibly strong ability to manage my emotional reactions and manage discomfort. I can probably suffer a lot more than most, which is an unfortunate but now positive side effect of what I've been through in my youth. So while I no longer have the strength and power to compete the way I would have liked to compete, at an Olympic level in running, I can now do this more extreme endurance work and live in that space of discomfort quite comfortably. So I think people need to, what will help people move through challenges is also looking, and sometimes you have to look quite deeply, but looking at what it's giving you as well.
I mean, is kind of from I don't do endurance challenges, so I'm looking outward from an outside place into endurance long distance challenges, and I'm wondering, and what I can gather is that the physical aspect of it is manageable, whereas the mental challenge is the one that really can cripple your the journey, if you will. I'm interested to understand as well, because by the sounds of it, you know, there's you have been through a discovery, a journey of self-discovery, if you will, and I wanted to kind of capture that in and trying to understand a bit better about what approach have you taken to this world record that has been influenced by the challenges that you have in the past.
Yeah, so I think we hear a lot this narrative of, physical versus mental. And I think for me, I don't really differentiate between them. I think they're one and the same. And I think if you're fueling yourself appropriately and if you have a process that allows you to ride within your capabilities and understand those capabilities, then your mindset naturally follows and can kind of live in that sustainable space. So I would say it's in my view, I think it's all physical and it's all a matter of focus and discipline. But getting to that point, it's all trainable. You can train your mind to enter a flow state, and you can train your mind to avoid distractions. And it's not easy, but it is possible. So I would say I focus predominantly on the physical. Um, and when you think of endurance challenges, my coach gave me this analogy a few weeks before the event, and it's so true. He said, think of the athlete like a vessel holding water. And over time, in multi-day challenges, there's holes being poked in that vessel. And it's your crew's job or your job, if you're unsupported, to find ways to plug those holes. But the holes will keep getting bored in that vessel. And your job is to just maintain as much water as possible until the end. And the things to plug the holes are nutrition, rest, recovery, mindset, and motivation, humor, anything you can find. So that's kind of how we approached the event, and that helped maintain my mindset alongside my physical capability throughout the week.
Wow, it's great. Such a brilliant insight.
Yeah,
I'm processing it as as you are
I
as you are
didn't.
describing that.
Yeah, I didn't. At first, I was like, yeah, okay, like that makes sense. And then by day four, I was like, oh, yeah, I could feel the holes being poked now. Like, so yeah, it's a brilliant analogy.
I mean, because you have been through many moments of extreme fatigue, perhaps even doubts on the bike as you were completing the ride itself. Was this analogy was in the back of your head, always kind of playing, or did you have other mental techniques that you employ to kind of to keep focus and keep motivated? I don't know, does motivation even play a part in this? Sorry, it's just a two-part question, but what do you employ to stay focused, really? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, so I'd say motivation had nothing to do with it. Motivation was irrelevant when you're in it. Yeah, because that's fleeting. Motivation will ebb and flow, and you need to anchor to what is inalienable to you. Um, so I would say also doubt didn't come into it once because again, that can ebb and flow alongside motivation. So I never paid heedance to that either. The way I approached it is people overcomplicate these things all the time. And what you need to do is you need to have a process. So for me, again, heart rate, cadence, watts. If it wasn't those three things, I didn't care. it was not my subject of focus because what you focus on expands. If you focus on how tired you are, how your saddle sore hurts, how your knees hurt, that's going to become your entire existence, and that's what leads people to quit before they're physically needing to quit. You just tap out mentally. So I understood what I focus on is going to expand and become my whole life this week. So those are those three items: cadence, heart rate, power, because those are within my control. My motivation, everything else comes and goes. So it almost became like a moving meditation where I just kind of locked in on those three things and nothing else really mattered. And then I taped three words to my handlebars that kind of helped me manage this. So these were focus, discipline, and gratitude. So focus again on that process. Nothing else matters. Discipline means I have had all these people come together. It is my job to listen to them, and it is my job to drive efficiency wherever I can. And then gratitude, and especially the harder it got. I think as athletes, sometimes we forget that we are so privileged to be in this position. Like we get to play sports for a living, right? And the harder it gets, the more grateful you should be that you have a body that allows you to do this. You have the resources that allow you to do this. And in my case, you have 8 people who are willing to take a week away from their families to help you. So you don't get to complain. This is a celebration. And so that's kind of how I anchored my mindset throughout the event.
Not often do you see and hear such a methodical and process-led approach.
I
Um,
work in finance, so I love methodology and process. If I can put it in a spreadsheet, I will.
Brilliant. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's something I wanted to touch about, like balancing the career and the endurance sport aspect. Something I want to touch upon. What I wanted to kind of ask you, building on actually what you just said, what does it mean pushing the boundaries? Because the boundaries, you can be pushing the boundaries, you can be pushing the pain threshold, the distances. Where do you draw the line on the sand, or is it ever moving?
Great question. For me, I think a lot of people think they found their limits and they haven't. And for me, I wanted to do this event with a crew because the way I defined my limits was my limit is at the point where either my physical like body just taps out and shuts down, and I'm reliant on others to kind of keep going. So as part of this event, I would say I succeeded in doing that, and not necessarily because the cycling was that hard. That was the easiest part of the event. It was from the sleep deprivation and the nutrition and the discomfort associated with both of those. So, for example, by the end of night 4, going into the morning of day 5, I think I had accumulated 4 hours of sleep. And since I started, and I remember radioing the crew behind me and just saying, I'm feeling really confused. Like, why am I riding a bike? I forgot what we were doing. And about 2 hours, they were like, eat some Mars bars, you'll be okay. So they were just like giving me candy. And then I think about 3 hours maybe after that point, we had just crossed the Forth Bridge up by Edinburgh. I actually lost consciousness while I was riding my bike and went headfirst into a nettle bush. And my crew, I went into hypoglycemic shock, so my crew had to give me glucose gel on my teeth and under my tongue and give me a ton of caffeine. They had to shine flashlights in my eyes to wake me up to get me back out on the bike. And that for me was awesome looking back on it because I was like, that was my limit from like a sleep deprivation perspective. And in that moment, my crew stepped up and did exactly what we had rehearsed and I had asked them to do, which was within the limits of, my welfare, keep me riding that bike. And they were able to put their personal feelings for me as like their friend and their loved one aside and say, how can we get her to the finish line? So that's how I define my limits, and that's how I found them.
My jaw is like dropping here, and because the scale of it, I really wanted to kind of dive a bit more into, you know, into the lessons that can be learned from putting together such a team, because there are many parallels that you can draw from a business perspective, from an enthusiast perspective, from as a personal directive in terms of what can be accomplished if you set your mind to, but and like look beyond the things that you can't control.
Mm.
What do you tell your team for in that moment you just described, so that they know and they recognize that this is not your limit? You can still have more to give. What do you tell?
It's it's a mix of art and science. I think the way we approached it is we just focused on like, our principles were like take care of the logistics ahead of time, so the logistics take care of you in the event. And what that looked like from like a well-being and caretaking perspective for an athlete was we got together, we practiced our trial runs, we spoke to individuals with like experience in extreme sleep deprivation. Two members of my team are military, so they understand it. And we basically briefed everyone in the crew. We said like, this is what it looks like. I'm going to be like a toddler who's like off their training wheels for the first time. I will be going all over the road at certain points. And then we basically just said, don't be alarmed. It doesn't mean that I'm in danger, but you guys have an accountability at that point to start making decisions for me. So you're going to need to tell me when to eat, when to sleep, and you'll have to make that judgment as to when to take me off the road or not. And I guess the progression, it looked like I started kind of wobbling quite a bit all over the road. So they would start laying on the horn when they would see my head drop, like I was about to fall asleep. And then it became more and more regular to the point where I just, again, like came off my bike because I fell asleep. And in that moment, they saw, she's obviously fine. She has no injuries. Her heart rate's fine. She's not like in danger. She's just in like hypoglycemic kind of shock. So she needs glucose and caffeine. So they were trained to recognize what it might look like if it was to happen. And then I think then that's when the art comes into it. They're like, okay, well, she's tough, so we'll get her going. And then if we need to take a sleep in like another hour, if she's still not kind of recovered and through that, then we'll do that. So it was a bit of problem solving on the fly.
That's where I wanted to get at, give a bit more context into that, because I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know how to get myself into a world record, right? Because it's not something I've explored. So it's from a curiosity point of view that allows me to create
yeah.
an understanding of what it looks like and what it entails.
Exactly. And then like after that incident, for example, so it took them maybe about 30 minutes to get me kind of up and back on the bike after that. And then a few hours later, I just got incredibly tired. So they said, okay, we're putting her down for like an hour and a half sleep. And apparently, while I was sleeping, all 8 members of the crew were stood outside the RV and they basically had a debate as to like how long they would let me sleep and what the pros and cons were versus where we were versus the record. And because I was about 200 kilometers ahead of the record at that point, they were like, okay, we'll give her 2 hours, but she's already so fatigued that like 2 hours or 3 hours won't make a difference. So let's cut our losses. Let's give her 2 hours, and then hopefully that'll be good enough to get her going. And it was. But our documentary crew actually captured that kind of debate that occurred. So I'm looking forward to watching that back, actually.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to watching the documentary when it comes out. Yeah, I wanted to now to go back to the duality of managing training for such an achievement, and your career and finance. And you have a demanding role. At the same time, you have to pair that with a very, I imagine, rigorous training regime. And that you mentioned that you love spreadsheets, and but that requires exceptional time management, I imagine. So how do you balance these two worlds, these two demands on your time?
Yeah, yeah, balance is not a word I would use to describe my life at that moment. It was I'm not exaggerating when I say every hour of my life, 7 days a week, was diarized for about 8 months leading up to the record. My alarm would go off between 3:30 and 4 every morning. I would ride for 2 hours. I would go to the gym for an hour. I would then go to work for the full day, and then I would do 2 to 3 hours on the bike after work. That was Monday to Friday, and then Saturdays and Sundays, I would do up to 6 hour sessions on the bike. So when I say it took sacrifice, it literally took every single hour of my waking time to balance my job and my training. It was not sustainable, but I knew that going into it, so I was comfortable and had full awareness of what my life would look like leading up to it. And that was a decision I was comfortable making, and I had the privilege of making because I don't have children, for example, I don't have caretaking duties. So it was something that I could do that a lot of people may not be able to do. So again, approached it with gratitude, even though it was nails when my alarm would go off so early every morning.
Well, there was a purpose. There was something much bigger, and the commitment that kind of
Exactly.
pushed you forward.
Yeah, and it taught me a lot about goal setting because, like, a lot of the time, and you see, especially people wanting to get into endurance sports, they pick these massive goals. And I think that's awesome because I think if you're not scared of your goals, they're not big enough. But what they don't do and where they miss a trick and why people don't always achieve them is because they don't work backwards from that and they don't fully map out, well, what are the sacrifices and trade-offs I'm going to have to make in my life to achieve that? And they need to be really honest with themselves about their current capabilities and the level of work it's going to take to progress there. But that's what separates the people who are successful from the ones who aren't, is I think that working backwards and understanding the sacrifice and building that into your life.
There's also an aspect that you have paired this, and that, and you can tell me what, you know, what it means for you in terms of the purpose and the advocacy work. But together with this achievement, there was perhaps a greater cause that you have rallied people to raise funds to, and you have done, you raise funds through this journey, through this world record ride, to for refugee charities, the Bike Project and the Bike for Refugees, which highlights again a strong sense of purpose from yourself. And that there is a story with this through my research. I've there is something more to this, and I wanted to kind of ask you how this, these feet aligning these athletic goals, with the social cause, as kind of, how have you put them together, and what is the motivation behind it?
Yeah, I think for me, I was always raised that if I'm ever at a point in my life where I have a seat at the table, it's a responsibility for me to use that seat to amplify other voices who aren't yet at the table. I was raised in a family that was very active in emergency caretaking, adoption, and fostering. Particularly, I'm Canadian, but particularly when we lived in Chicago, in Illinois, where we would have emergency social services show up at our door at all nights, at all times of the night, and drop off children who were removed from dangerous situations in our homes. So, growing up, I was surrounded by children from, all countries, all backgrounds, going through difficult things. And I had a mother who campaigned and actually won a legal case against the state of Illinois for discriminatory practices in the adoption and fostering system. So I was raised with activist parents and I was raised understanding what privilege looks like. And so I think now, and I find this in my corporate career too, and in athletics, when you're doing events that are going to attract attention, you should use that attention to highlight or amplify the voices that you think are important of like marginalized groups or communities. So in this case, you're right, we did it for the Bike Project and Bikes for Refugees. So these two charities take used bicycles, refurbish them, and distribute them to asylum seekers and refugees in the UK. Because these individuals, they often, depending on their status, they're not allowed to take jobs. They cannot work. They do not receive subsidized public transit. So they have no way to take their kids to school. They have no way to get to food banks or language lessons. So yeah, they do transformative work.
Yeah, it's a brilliant way of giving back. using the profile that you have been building and giving back to people that also need. And the bike is a beautiful way of giving back because it represents can represent multiple things, but for those refugees, it gives them a tool to move around, gives them a bit of freedom, and gives them a choice as well. I imagine, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And like the bike has changed my life. And so the work that they do resonates with me, albeit in a different way, from the way the bike will change the lives of newcomers to this country. And I think even beyond the bike, what I really love about these charities is that it introduces these individuals to the cycling community. And the cycling community, and what I found about it is everyone is so rad. Like everyone is so inclusive, so supportive. And what these charities do is they really show newcomers that there's like a whole community of people that's waiting to greet them and is excited that they're here. And so I just really wanted to like spread that kind of positive message in the work they do as far as possible because that's what's resonated with me as a relative newcomer to the cycling community as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a very right to point out because the cycling community can be very open, can be very friendly, and I think that's a very important point to put across. I'm interested now to kind of bring this a little bit as well to kind of, if you can, to the listener, to the people that are listening to your story, and no doubt they have heard of you through mainstream media, also through the cycling media. Advice would you give to those looking to embark on their own cycling endurance challenges?
I would say something that I like to talk about a lot is aggressive patience. And this comes back to the goal setting. So if you want to have big goals, if you want to do your first 100-mile ride, your first 500-mile ride, like it doesn't matter. If you have a big goal, you need to be incredibly patient with yourself as you put in the work to progress towards that goal. Um, People hear my story like, oh, you've been riding bikes 2.5 years and you set a world record. Like, what they don't see is the 5 hours of work every single day I was putting in. So I think my advice is don't expect miracles overnight. Anchor on small wins every single day. How can you build consistency and discipline in your life in a way that encourages you and motivates you to just love your hobby even more? And if you can apply this concept of being aggressively patient in pursuit of big goals, you will excel 10 times faster than like a boom and bust approach where you're training some weeks and not training at all others. So be patient with yourself and recognize the small wins.
Nowadays, in where people see things so everything is so achievable so readily, you click a button and it arrives the next day. It seems like there's no effort and aggressive patience. It's a brilliant way of putting it because it's to set those goals to accomplish whatever you set your mind to, but big goals specifically, even, you really have to put the work, and you really have to, as you mentioned, build it backwards and say, okay, what do I need to do to achieve that? What does it look like? What the preparations and the resilience that comes with it? So it kind of leads me on to my next question brilliantly, because it's something that I ask all of my guests. It kind of, I hope, encapsulates a little bit of the personality and the resilience that you have. And the question is, what does success look like to you?
Success for me is finding the limits of my capabilities. So it's not being the best, it's not getting a world record, it's not winning a race. It's how can I show up and be the best within the confines of my capabilities. So how can I find my limits? That's what success is to me. And that's what's enabled me to progress and, do a PhD, to build my career, and to now, achieve this record. But the success wasn't in doing those things, it was in finding the limits of what my academic, professional, and athletic capabilities are. So don't compare yourself to others, focus on your capabilities and how you can I guess, exploit those to their full advantage.
It's great insights into, I think, for myself, for people listening, because I think it resonates specifically with me because it does a lot. It does put you in perspective the work that it goes into building something, because it requires patience, it requires time, and effort, and motivation. Like you said earlier on, doesn't play a part in it. If you are committed to the process, motivation doesn't necessarily play a role in it. So yeah, it's I think it's such an inspiring kind of story that you have, and how you share it, and the lens you go to kind of to make sure it also resonates with people that won't ever dream of riding a world record ride, but can put those learnings that you just shared with us into more manageable, or to themselves, something that they can apply easily to their lives.
Exactly, exactly. And I think, sometimes you hear these stories and you almost get demotivated by them because you're like, well, I don't have the environment in my life that enables me to do that. Like, that's fine. It's like not everybody needs to go through an illness and become like an endurance athlete and like break it. That's not the point, and that's not the standard. I think what we need to focus on is, yeah, you need to find your own capabilities. You need to find what resonates with you and your identity and what you want to achieve. And then you just need to be patient with yourself and you need to celebrate the wins and wherever that puts you on the journey, if that's running your first 5K or going out for your first 100-mile bike, like that's epic. And like that is no smaller an accomplishment than setting a world record. Because it depends on your environment and your context. And a win is a win, and we should all be celebrating each other's achievements and not comparing.
We come to the point in the podcast that every guest leaves a question to my next guest, not
Uh-oh.
knowing who they are. And this is such a brilliant question. I did not plan this. Is literally the last guest that came on my podcast left this question for my next guest. And the next guest is you. So the
Okay.
question is the following: what's something you once believed to be true that you have since completely changed your mind about?
It's a deep question. Okay. I think what okay. Something I used to believe to be true was that my sense of self and my identity revolved around what I achieved. And what I now know to be true is that that approach puts you in a very precarious position when life doesn't go your way. So, what I now know to be true is that your identity is really a set of characteristics or traits that are inalienable to you. So, you're stubborn, you're disciplined, you're kind, you're compassionate. This is your identity. But yeah, I would say that was a hard lesson learned for me.
I'm interested. What caused that shift?
My illness.
Your illness. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had defined myself as like I was an Olympic hopeful. I was multiple national record holder. I was one of the youngest people in history to achieve world qualifying standard. At like my future was set, but then it was taken away from me almost overnight, and I knew I could never get it back. So I was forced as a very young adult to try to understand what was I and who was I outside of accomplishments. So that's what really kind of led that change, and that change and that change of anchoring and my focus to really my traits and my characteristics is what's enabled me and given me the confidence to kind of rebuild my life again.
It's such a powerful way you just answer that question. Me included. I think take pause here, just take a moment to reflect on this, on what just Sarah shared, because this is what really defines whoever as a person. It's really what you just described. I think it's very powerful. So it's not every day that you come across something as deep as this. And that's the beauty of these questions. It can spark so many interesting answers. And that was the case today.
Oh, thank you. I learned it the hard way, so hopefully you guys don't have to.
So, with keeping with the tradition, what question would you like to leave to my next guest?
Okay. I think I'm going to ask the next guest. When is the last time you did something for the first time?
Very good, very good. Oh my god, I get so excited with these questions because it just you're like, oh wow, I can't wait for the next guest to answer these questions because oh man, so great. um, Sarah, it's been a huge honor and privilege to have these short but very deep and I think meaningful to me and hope to the many listeners that will listen to this episode. You are an inspiration to people that follow you, that people that will hear from you in the future. So I think keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. It was a privilege to join you.
A massive thank you to Dr. Sarah Ruggins for sharing her extraordinary story of resilience, determination, and her passion for both finance and endurance sports. Her insights into aggressive patience and incredible athletic achievements, including her recent world record, truly embody the spirit of Ride to Success. And if you love this conversation, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and follow us on podcast streaming platforms, and join us on this journey to a more creative, active, and purpose-driven life, all powered by the bike. Until next time, keep pedaling forward.